Hello everyone and welcome to this session. I am Obaro Ogbo, a senior software engineer at Microsoft, and I am a brown-skinned African male wearing a dark blue t-shirt. Thank you for joining us in this session. Here's the agenda for this presentation. I'll provide an overview of the FileServer protocol test suites and what the Windows protocol test suites are in general. I'll discuss what's new in the FileServer test suite, show a demo of the test suite using the PTM service to run a few tests, and then hand over to my colleague Amalachukwu to round up with protocol testing on Wireshark. The FileServer protocol test suite is a part of a larger suite of programs called the Windows protocol test suites. So what is a Windows protocol test suite? The Windows protocol test suites are a suite of tests written to verify if a Windows protocol implementation meets certain interoperability requirements as specified in the relevant protocol specifications and documentations. The test suites were originally developed to test Microsoft's in-house protocol implementations, and it became used to test and verify the behavior of Windows clients and servers, basically Windows behaviors. More recently, it has been used by protocol implementers to test and verify their third-party implementations. It's worth noting that the test suite does not cover every detail of a protocol's requirements and does not provide certification for an implementation. However, it's a useful indication of interoperability. The Windows Protocol Test Suite was initially a Windows-only application, but since it has been migrated to .NET SDK, .NET Core, and now .NET 6, it's a fully cross-platform application available on all platforms that support .NET. The test suite can be thought of as a layered application. The .NET SDK is available on Windows, Linux, and macOS as seen on the slide. The protocol test framework and the Proto SDK are built on the .NET SDK. And the various test suites such as FileServer, RDP client, RDP server, and others are built on top of these two. And we finally have the Protocol Test Manager implementations, the PTM service and PTM CLI, which provide alternate user interface ways to execute the test suites. All the various Windows protocol test suites are open sourced and have been available on GitHub since 2016. The links to the GitHub projects are on the slides. In total, we have 11 test suites available covering 6 different categories. For file sharing, we've got the FileServer test suite, which is the focus of this session. But we've also got the MS-SMB test suite for SMB versions prior to version 2, and MS-SMBD or SMB Direct for SMB over RDMA. We've also got test suites for Kerberos and MS-AZOD in the security category. For remote desktop, we've got RDP client and RDP server, as well as other test suites as shown on the screen on the slides. We would love to get feedback on the use of any of these test suites. So if you have interest in any of them or in all of them, please reach out and let us know. We're open to hearing how you use them and how the test suites helps you in your implementations. Now moving to the FileServer test suite, the current slide shows some of the protocols and messages within its scope. The FileServer test suite covers some of the most popular file sharing protocols such as MS-SMB2, MS-FSCA, the file system algorithms, MS-SQOS, among others. The scope also includes most of the message types sent, such as negotiate, tree connect and disconnect, session setup, IO control codes, and much more. Now, the currently available features of the test suite today, of the FileServer test suite today, include support for SMB2 dialects between 2.0.0.2 to 3.11 inclusive, as well as messages within the features shown on the screen. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list of all the message types that are currently covered, but just to give you an idea of, the message types and the dialects currently supported by the test suite today. The FileServer test suite uses both traditional tests and model-based tests. Traditional tests covers basic functionalities and scenarios, and these are the tests that are under active development today. Model-based tests have over 2,000 test cases generated by 13 models, provides better coverage on parameter combination, message sequences, and negative tests. Although we aren't currently adding any more model-generated tests at the moment, we still provide support for the existing model test cases. So in your testing, if you run into any issues with both model or traditional tests, please reach out to us. Now, here's the basic infrastructure needed to run the FileServer test suite. We need a driver computer that acts like a synthetic client to test against the SUT. Now, this SUT is a file server that can be on Windows, Linux, macOS, or any third-party implementation. The underlying connection can be over TCP or QUIC. Now, the FileServer test suite is developed on top of the protocol test framework, which is itself based on the Visual Studio unit tests. The protocol test framework provides functionalities like configuration, the adapters, logging, and network capture. Now, the FileServer test suite is composed of the Proto SDK, protocol adapters, and test cases. The test cases are run against the SUT, and in some cases where the test case requires some specific behavior, configuration, or setup on the SUT, there's an SUT control adapter that can trigger actions to control status and configurations on the SUT. The FileServer test suite supports testing against two types of environments. The first supported environment is the FileServer standard. Here we've got a single SUT and a single driver computer with an optional domain controller. So this is really the environment discussed in the previous slide, where the driver and the SUT are on the same network or able to reach each other over the network. The second supported test environment is the FileServer cluster environment, where the SUT is the entire cluster, but setting up a cluster is outside the scope of this session. Let's move on to what's new in the latest release, version 4.22.9.0. The latest release of the FileServer test suite is version 4.22.9 and is currently available on GitHub at the URL on the slide. For this release, we added a few new test cases. We enabled support for quick tests from a Linux driver and worked on bug fixes. For the PTM service, we fixed a bug with auto-detecting SUT capabilities from a Linux driver, along with other bug fixes. One of the new included tests is the test for noting that a modified file has its last access time updated. This algorithm is described in the MS FSA technical documentation available on docs.microsoft.com. So just to walk through this test case, or this test case implementation. So we're going to use the case where we have a single test driver and an SUT. So the test driver establishes a connection with the SUT. The test driver creates a file on the SUT and writes to the file. Now the test driver queries the file basic information and stores the last access time for that file. Test driver makes a connection, reads the file contents, and then queries file basic information and stores the last access time from this query. The test driver then verifies that the last access time, the first last access time, is earlier than the second last access time. This is a successful test. Great, let's switch screens quickly for a demo using the PTM service. So for this demo, we are going to be running the Windows protocol test suite, the FileServer test suite using the PTM service. You can get the PTM service from our GitHub page. That's it, github.com/Microsoft/Windows protocol test suites. Scroll down, go to the releases. You will see that the most recent Windows protocol test suite version is 4.23.3. But this version includes updates for the RDP client test suite and the RDP server test suites only. If you look at the assets, you will see that those are the only test suites updated. But for the file server, you have to scroll down a bit to the 4.22.9.0 version. You look at the assets, and you will see the file server test suites, either the .zip or the .tar.gz. The PTM service is also available on the releases page, either as a tar.gz or as a .zip. So I have downloaded these two artifacts already. That's the PTM service and that's the file server test sheet. But for this demo, we need the PTM service, which I've extracted to my C drive. That's it there. So we go into the PTM service folder and we open in a terminal. If you look at the contents of this folder, you see a couple of PowerShell scripts, a couple of shell scripts, and some batch scripts also. So we have one called run, we have one called install, and we have one called uninstall. So as the names imply, the install will be to install the PTM service, the run will be to run, and uninstall will uninstall. But if you try to run the PTM service, if you call the run script before you perform an installation, it will check if there's an existing installation and then call the install script for you. So for this, we want to start a new installation. The default is yes. It creates an install folder, an install ID. Leave that as the default. Do we want to specify another? No. Do we want to create a desktop shortcut? Yes. Do we want to change the PTM service URLs? No. Let's use the default URLs. And let's start the PTM service now. Okay, PTM service has started and it's running on this HTTP port and on this HTTPS port. Let's continue. And that's the PTM service running. So the first thing we want to do, when we click on run test suite, there's no test suite found. So the first thing we want to do is to install a test suite and the PTM service. So we come to management and click on install test suite. You can give it any name you like. I'm going to call this FileServer 4.22.9.0. And you select the zip or the .tar.gz and click on install. You could install multiple versions of the same test suite. This way, if you run tests and you mess up the environment, you can install a separate test suite and you have, the entire environment from scratch. So if you click on Run Test Suite, that's the freshly installed test suite. Click on Select. This first screen is an introduction, and there's a handy deployment guide here describing the environment and how to set up. Click on Next. Now you could have multiple configurations. For example, if you want a configuration to test IO control codes, you want a separate configuration to test durable handles, you could create that. Let's call this configuration new config. And we edit this configuration. So what we want to do is to run auto detection so that the PTM service will try to detect the capabilities of the SUT. We accept that. So my SUT is called VM65X, and the target basic share is file share. It's not in a cluster, it's not in a domain. The username is administrator. The password is a bit different from the default, and we want to use the default negotiate authentication. So we'll click on detect, and we see that the detection is in progress, completed. Click on next. And on the next screen, we will see the results of the auto detection. So for example, this is the maximum SMB version detected from the SUT. And you can, go through the detection results to be sure that your SUT capabilities were correctly detected. We click on next. And this takes you to a screen where you can see all the available test cases depending on what you select. So here you can filter for a subset of the test cases. Like, for example, if you want to only test the SMB311 test cases, you could select SMB311. If you want to run only the BVT test, or you're interested in only BVT test, you could select BVT. And you can also filter using other categories. Click on next when you are done. Now on this screen, you can set some other configuration values. For example, if you are running FSA tests and you have an NTFS file share folder, REFS, you're trying to run tests on a particular file system, you can select it here. This screen helps you set all the other configuration values that can be set for the FileServer test suite. When you are done setting those config values, click next. On this screen, if you are running any test that needs an SUT control adapter, you could set the control adapter you want to use for your test on this screen. We're going to leave it at the default because for our test, for this test case, we don't need to set that. From this screen, you could either run all the cases from your pre-filtered result, or the pre-filtered test cases. If you didn't filter, if you selected all the test cases, then they will all be available here, and you can click run all, or you could select particular test cases you want to run. In this case, we want to run some of the new tests that were added to the test suite. This is what I spoke about: algorithm noting file modified, file last access time, and algorithm noting file modified, directory last access time. So let's run these two test cases. And while this is ongoing, if you click on the terminal, you can see some activity on the terminal screen. At the same time, you could click on view result and you see as the test cases are running, the test cases have completed, and we have 2 past tests. If you had some failures, there will be a failure tab, a drop down. If you had inconclusive tests, there will also be inconclusive with the number, the total number, so you could have a quick visual of your past tests, failed tests, and inconclusive tests. You could export this profile so that you could import it and reuse, or run it from using the PTM CLI. That way you don't need a browser. You can just run it from a terminal. And also you could scroll through and take a look at the test cases, view the assertions. If there was a failure, you will see the step where it failed, and some helpful debug information regarding why the test failed. So this is running the FileServer test suite using the PTM service in a quick demo. Thanks for your time.
Hello everyone, and welcome again to Microsoft's Interop track in this year's sambaXP conference. My name is Amalachukwu Offia. I am a light brown-skinned African female wearing a denim shirt and have my hairstyle in corner braids. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. This part of our session is a very quick introduction to a survey where we are looking to understand what protocol testing and analyzing tools you use in your work. Over the next couple of slides, I will share what we're hearing from our customers and partners so far, while my colleague Hargit, who is in the room, hands out surveys to get your feedback. So question, do you use Wireshark? As some may already know, Microsoft's Message Analyzer, also known as MMA, was deprecated. And to make sure that we continue to support our partners and customers, we're considering a replacement tool. In our interactions and engagements with partners and customers, we have seen a strong preference for Wireshark as a replacement tool for MMA. I would like to hear what you think as well. There are a few reasons why our customers prefer Wireshark, but these are the top ones we've heard. Wireshark is open source. It works on various platforms including Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. It is also very popular in the industry and has a large user and support community. Are there other reasons why you prefer Wireshark? Do tell us. Would you like to see Microsoft contributing to Wireshark? How would that impact the work that you do? Are there any specific pain points this could potentially help resolve? Or maybe opportunities this could create for you? How about your engineering or testing requirements? Are there any top ones you like us to keep in mind? For example, are there specific protocols or protocol families you would like to see us cover first? Would you rather see breadth versus depth in coverage? Do fill out the survey and tell us everything. We look forward to receiving your feedback. Thank you.